All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait for our audiences to populate. We're live streaming on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter this afternoon. We are having our National Expungement Week workshop right here on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. We're going to wait for our populations, as I said, to join us this afternoon. We're also going to be joined by an amazing group of panelists who will be hosting these discussions tonight around the subject matter. So we're looking forward to hearing from our folks as they come on to the stage. We're just waiting for a few of our panelists to join us. We're so excited for today's National Expungement Week workshop, where we're going to be sharing with you information in regards to expungement and expungement-related capabilities for folks who are here on the live Zoom. So important that we're here today. Zoom and social media. Waiting for folks to join us. Okay. All right, so I'm going to invite up our guests as they're coming into the room. Before I do that, let me just start off by thanking our amazing partners, our community partners for today's workshop on the National Week of Expungement, right here with your favorite New York State Assembly member, Khalil M. Anderson, represent the beautiful 31st Assembly District here in Southeast Queens. Let me thank Queens Defenders. The staff at Queens Defenders, Brandon Jeffries, Helen Montero, Carolyn Joseph, Amani Tarafi. These are the folks who work day in and day out to make sure that Queens Defenders is an organization. It is a space for our young people who are justice involved. So we are so thankful and blessed to have them as our partners. I'm going to bring them up shortly. Let me just continue to thank the rest of our community partners. I want to thank Canaware Society, Grizzly Boncourt, and Abe Tejada. Thank them so very much for allowing joining us and allowing us space today to share with our constituents here in the 31st Assembly District about this very important workshop. I have them behind stage and they're going to come on stage shortly, but I want to thank them for today's workshop. Next, I'd like to also acknowledge my team, my staff, thank them for putting together this very important workshop. We have so many resources, so much information as it relates to COVID-19, as it relates to expungement and making sure people understand the rights and responsibilities of expungement. Just to give a quick brief before I bring folks on, this week, September 26th to October 2nd, is National Expungement Week. And basically the importance of National Expungement Week is to focus, is our ability as elected officials, as community leaders, as residents, to focus on four very important things as people are reintegrating into society. We want to make sure folks can reenter. We want to make sure folks can repair the harm. We want to make sure that there's healing, and most importantly, we want to make sure there's generational wealth. So when someone returns home from incarceration, we want to make sure that the community is ready and prepared for them to have the opportunity to be their most productive and successful part of our society and a part of our community. So we thank our partners so much. I'm going to invite them on right now. So I'm going to invite Miss Carolyn Joseph, Esquire, who is the staff attorney for Queens Defenders. She'll introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Joseph. I'm the Director of Special Projects at Queens Defenders. Queens Defenders is a public defender organization. We represent the citizens of Queens who are charged with criminal offenses, be they minor all the way up to homicide. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Good to see you. And I love your background. Not a staff attorney. I misspoke. Director. All right. And It looks like we also have Abe Chahada, who is also one of our panelists today from Canaware Society. He'll introduce himself and tell us what his organization does.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Assembly Member. I want to thank the Assembly Member so much for your leadership and your partnership on this, as well as the Queen's Defenders, for bringing your expertise. And yesterday I had the opportunity to work with some of the Queen's Defenders staff, in promoting this event. So thank you so much for everything you do in the community. Today I'm representing Cannabis Society, right? So Cannabis Society is an organization dedicated to bridging the gap between the cannabis industry and the cannabis community. And for us, that means a lot of different things. That includes repairing the harms of the war on drugs, as you mentioned before, Assembly Member. That includes empowering people in our communities to understand what these laws mean. That includes helping people figure out how to get into the industry if they do want to get into the industry. So it's a holistic approach that we have to kind of like addressing the problems that were caused by the war on drugs and the prohibition of cannabis. So I want to thank y'all so much for having me. We have some conversations coming up as well. So on Sunday, we have a conversation where we'll be discussing other aspects of the MRTA. So today, I know the discussion will be mostly about the expungement provisions and probably other things that come up during that conversation. But on Sunday, we'll be having a conversation where we'll have advocates from both within government, from outside government who worked on getting the MRTA passed. So for everyone who's watching, if you're interested in these conversations, if you want to learn more about this industry, if you understand that the people who were most harmed in this war deserve to have an opportunity to be part of this industry, tap in with us, tap into our conversations, keep working with us. And I look forward to working more with you both in the future. We hope that in the spring we can have some other events, hopefully have some in-person events. We were used to doing that pre-COVID, and we would like to go back to that. And just excited to be here today and to be part of the conversation and to be part of the partnership. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you so much, Abe Tejada, for being here on this call. The reason why we're hosting this, and I thank you so much for both of you giving us the context of the important work that your agencies and organizations do here in the community. I'm seeing so many people join the conference as we're talking today because they really want to get access to this information, these resources. But let me talk about the impetus of why I decided that this is my role and responsibility as a state legislator to focus on expungement, to focus on the new MRTA, the marijuana legislation, and then I'll hear from you guys what you're doing as it relates to the MRTA and making sure that we're expunging folks' records, but making sure that we understand the new laws that are on the books and how it's going to impact our community. So when I first took office, one of the things that I said that I wanted to accomplish as a state legislator is look at how we can work to reduce harm and how do we support our friends, family, and neighbors who are returning home. That's what real criminal justice reform and change looks like in our communities. And so I committed to that work by working with some of my colleagues in government who've been doing, and activists and advocates who've been doing the work around keeping our communities safe and healthy in that respect. I'm the prime sponsor of Assembly Bill number 7440, which is a bill that would work to create the Office of Expungement. It's a sister bill to the Clean Slate Bill, and the Clean Slate Bill is a bill which is a policy model that basically uses a technological algorithm to automatically clear criminal records of people. So if a person stays crime free, it'll automatically work to clear those records. And my bill creates the office that would operate that policy model created in Clean Slate. I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Assemblywoman Carolyn Cruz, for her work on that and to work with me on the Office of Expungement. So important. The overall objective for the bill and for my bill is to operationalize that work. So we want to bridge community and policy in the name of harm reduction and correcting the wrongs of the state, correcting the wrongs that have happened that kept individuals doubly incarcerated, right? After serving your time, you now can't get a job. You can't have access to housing. It's really hard to get access to healthcare. These are pieces that we want as our folks are reintegrating into society, that they have those tools and resources to do so. And one of the things that has kept our community incarcerated so long is drug offenses, even nonviolent, violent drug offenses, have kept our folks incarcerated for so long, many of which were unjust. And so my bill, along with Clean Slate, seeks to correct, those wrongs in a larger scale, a larger scheme of reforming the criminal justice system, because we want our folks to be able to have the opportunity to, again, reintegrate into society. Right now, when we're speaking about marijuana, for example, now that we passed the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act last year, which is a landmark piece of legislation. It took over 10 years to write, to implement, to organize. I'm so thankful for folks like you guys who are on the call, that are actively every single day advocating to make sure that our people have a seat at the table in the markets, have a seat at the table as consumers, have a seat at the table in the criminal justice space. We want to make sure that our communities are prioritized with this. And I know the Office of Cannabis Management is getting their board together, and they're getting organized and constituted. Their first meeting is October 5th, so we're really excited about that. But your work as Queens Defenders, and your work, Abe, as Counterware Society, is really to educate our community and our constituents on how we bridge the gap. How do we work to ensure that folks have a seat at the table? So, Abe, why don't you share a little bit about what Counterware? I know you shared a brief about what Counterware does, but can you share a little more in depth about what work that you all are doing as an organization to help individuals integrate into society, to help individuals get into the cannabis market as the law is written? And then I'll have Carolyn share a little bit more about the law and differentiating the pieces between sealed records and expungement, which is a really, really critical topic.
Sure. Thank you. So like I mentioned before, we've had a number of different events. So for example, like this event was kind of generated out of our last event. So we recently had an expungement fair in Brooklyn, right? So we partnered with a different legal service provider, right, to create a space and did the same type of outreach in the community to bring folks in that space. In addition to having legal service providers, we also partner with one of our other organizations, Women of Color in Cannabis. And so what they do is they kind of help women of color get a seat in the industry, and they have job listings. They have other opportunities, training for people who want to become involved in the cannabis industry. So we had them there. We reached out to some local vendors, right, who had CBD beverages. So we had some CBD beverages in the space to allow that vendor to have an opportunity to see people in the market. And we also partnered with another local vendor to have food there as well, right? So our idea was to target people from the community, bring those folks from the community together, bring the services that some folks in the community need or are looking for if they want to get involved in this industry or address their conviction record. And so that was kind of our last event, right? Prior to that, as I mentioned, we have events like the event we're going to have on Sunday, where we're really going to discuss kind of like breaking down the MRTA, not only the expungement provisions, but how different parts of the law impact different areas of the business, talking about some of the other aspects of the law that are not discussed as much as the criminal justice reforms and expungement reforms that are part of that law. And so most of our events are like that, right? They're either some type of educational event, right, which our Canada Talks are, or we have in-person events where we may have a space, try to have some economic generation for local businesses and businesses from the community, but also have a service component, right, where we're giving people the services that they need to empower themselves and to address whatever barriers may be in their life, right? Because as you mentioned, these criminal convictions can create huge barriers in people's lives, whether it's, getting benefits, getting jobs, or doing other things that they need to do to move forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abe, for giving us that general specific rundown of what your organization is doing. I'm gonna, once Carolyn presents just the overview of the law itself, we're gonna go into questions and answers to hear back from our community on how they can, one, get into the market, but two, what their rights are on Carolyn's side. So I want that to be today's discussion, as well as talking about the difference between sealing and expungement. So I'm gonna share my screen and allow Carolyn to see the presentation. Let me just add you to the stream. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go over, in a very general way, some of the main principles of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act and how it impacts criminal records, sealing, and a little bit too about the law, because everybody heard that this law passed and everybody's ready to use marijuana, but there are some qualifications.
So you'll just say next slide.
Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so New York State Senate Bill S854A permits the growing and use of cannabis by anyone 21 years of age and older. So that's very important, because people just heard that the bill passed and they think like it's legal for everyone. So it's not legal if you are under the age of 21. You can still be stopped by the police. You can still get a ticket if you are under the age of 21. It authorizes the continued use of medical marijuana, which we know is very important, because in the past it's been very difficult to access medical marijuana and to go through all the hoops that you need to go through. So I think this law also makes that a little easier. It creates opportunities for communities that have historically experienced high rates of enforcement, which is what the assembly member referred to, that in our communities, we were over-policed, over-arrested, over-prosecuted for simple offenses, which in other communities didn't even rate a ticket. MRTA authorizes programs to assist with obtaining cannabis, adult use licenses to produce, process, purchase, and or possess cannabis. So it empowers members of our community, the most impacted community, to now take advantage of this law and to learn how to set up your own business, be it producing, be it selling, be it, manufacturing, because there's so many ways actually that cannabis is used, So it exempts certain offenses and or persons from prosecution for the consumption and display, production, or distribution of cannabis. And it requires the expungement of all convictions for Penal Law 22105, which is criminal possession of marijuana, or criminal possession of marijuana in public. And so what I noticed years back was when they made a conscious decision to criminalize our young people. So what they would do is say a police officer goes to a park and he sees 5 kids and there's one joint. That police officer was then authorized to arrest all 5 of those young people, put all 5 of those young people through the system, meaning 24 hours in custody, in central booking, before seeing a judge, before they got released. And that way they got their pictures, they got their fingerprints, they got them on file for one joint, 5 people. And that's something I saw like every single night that they would do. And so I think, it was abused. The system abused cannabis and used it as a way to criminalize not only young people, but adults as well. Next page, please. So our next page speaks about expungement. And so the new law provides for expungement. Now, expungement is very, very important. That's a very important word, and I'm glad to hear that the assembly member is working towards more expungement. Expungement literally means that if you were arrested and convicted for something and that record is expunged, your record is wiped clean. It's gone. So if someone tried to go and look it up, they will not be able to see it. The only people who would have access to that record would be the person or an agent of that person. And it's also important that once the record is expunged, you won't be able to access it. So for example, as you'll see later in the presentation, if you need that record for immigration purposes, get it before it's expunged, because once it's expunged, it is gone and you will not be able to go back and get a copy of the complaint or get any of the documents, which the immigration court usually will ask for. So built into the law is that the expungement for these marijuana offenses that people were convicted of, it's automatic. It means that you don't have to apply to get it expunged. It should happen automatically by operation of law. And so I can say that, like in Queens, like for our office, we were representing a lot of people who were charged with marijuana, right? So we got our list together of all the cases, discussed it with the DA's office, and then they dismissed those cases that were pending. And the older cases also should be automatically dismissed without an application. Now, you'll hear later on that there are some instances where an application actually does need to be made to the court, and I'll explain that later. But that's the important thing about expungement. It's gone. And it's so key that with the new law that the assembly member referenced, that he is including automatic expungement, because it creates such a burden on our citizens if they have to do the work to get something removed, because sometimes they don't even know the law has changed. They don't even know the law exists. And that's why Queens Defenders, we've been doing workshops and presentations like this, so people know that now when they apply for something, if they had that old marijuana conviction, it should be gone. Next slide, please. So if your record is expunged, in New York State, you will no longer have to disclose the arrest because it is gone, wiped clean. You must still disclose the arrest, though, if you are applying for anything involving the federal government, and that includes immigration, because the federal government keeps their own database, their own records, and so you don't want to run afoul of, you don't want to follow their rules or put yourself in a predicament where they ask, have you been arrested? Like say you're applying for a green card and they ask, have you been arrested? And with the feds, you say no. That can hurt you. But if you were applying for something within the state, for example, if you're applying for a license in New York State and your record has been expunged, you rightly can say on that New York State application that you do not have an arrest. But with the federal government, you must disclose the arrest. Just having the arrest disclosed should not hurt you, because they'll also see that the case is dismissed. Records are only available to the individual whose case has been expunged and their agent, as I indicated. The information will not be available to law enforcement once it has been expunged. And here's the big difference with expungement and sealing. When a case is, say, dismissed and sealed, right, that record, most people do not have access to that record, but law enforcement can still access that record. And for example, if you get arrested again, a prosecutor can actually make a motion to unseal a record. And so that means to open it back up, and they could see everything. They could see what you were charged with. They can see any statements that you made. So there's a big difference between expungement and sealing. And expungement is definitely the way to go, because it's gone. It's wiped clean. And it gives you that new start, because people can't go and look at it and then try to use it against you. And just to remember with sealing, the arrest may still show up on a background check, but obviously then you can explain it away by showing that it was dismissed. And that's usually the end of the conversation once you show it's dismissed. Moving to the new sections of MRTA. Next page, please. Next page, please. Okay, so MRTA created Article 222, which is a new section that covers marijuana-related offenses in the penal law. So as I indicated before, a person who is 21 years of age or older is an adult. A person who is 21 years of age and older may possess 3 ounces or less of marijuana, the flower, in a public place. They may possess up to 5 pounds of marijuana in their residence. They may smoke cannabis almost anywhere that cigarette smoking is permitted, including sidewalks, front stoops, or other public places, but not in automobiles. A person between the age of 18 to 21 years of age is not permitted to possess even small quantities of marijuana, less than 3 ounces, and is subject to a civil penalty of up to $50. if they're found in possession of marijuana. They can also be prosecuted under the penal law for amounts in excess of 3 ounces. Under MRTA, no person shall smoke marijuana in a place where cigarette smoking is prohibited. They can't smoke marijuana while driving, and driving while impaired by use of marijuana, VTL 1192-4. So I know one of the concerns with MRTA is that the NYPD, et cetera, is that people are just going to smoke marijuana and drive, and they don't really have a way to test for it. So, people do have to be mindful and responsible. Like Assemblymember Anderson said, it took 10 years for this law to pass. So as citizens, we need to be responsible in our use of cannabis. So you would not want to smoke and get high before you drive a vehicle, because that's not only dangerous to you, it's dangerous to others on the street. Next slide, please. So I'll just point out that MRT also created an advisory board that the governor has to appoint. That board will be responsible for approving the spending by the community grants. And the community grants are for the people in the community who were adversely affected and arrested and over-policed. So we encourage the community members who are interested to look into these grants and to apply for these grants, because one of the goals of MRTA is to rebuild the communities that were negatively impacted and to create jobs and businesses to create the generational wealth that Assemblymember referred to. Therefore, until this board is fully populated and does their work, there are no licensed sellers yet until that board creates the regulations that will govern the sale and distribution of cannabis in New York State. With automobiles, the police have used the smell of marijuana as the pretext for taking everyone out of a car, arresting everybody, searching the car, and finding contraband or different kinds of evidence that then they subsequently will use against someone. And so now they can no longer use that as the pretext for stopping your vehicle and searching your vehicle. And just in case everyone doesn't know, you have a right to tell the police when they ask, if they ask, that you do not consent to your vehicle being searched. Let's see. Now, if a police officer is investigating whether a driver is operating while impaired by drugs or alcohol, the search area is limited to just what's accessible to the driver. So, like, the police can't go into your trunk under the guise of they stopped you because they smelled marijuana. Drivers and passengers who smoke in marijuana in a car can be issued a traffic violation. They can be issued a criminal court summons as well. Next page, please. I covered that. So next page. So these are some of the other offenses that are scheduled to be expunged. And so I'll just go over it real quickly. 221.15, which was criminal possession of marijuana in the 4th degree. That was possession of 20 ounces. Criminal possession of marijuana in the 3rd degree, which was possession of more than 8 ounces. Criminal possession of marijuana in the 2nd degree, which was possession of more than 16 ounces. And the thing with these laws here and also knowing an unlawful sale of marijuana to 2140 is, practically speaking, like in court, when I would see these cases, lots of times people of color were literally incarcerated because the district attorney had a policy where you would have to pay a fine, and you were fined $100 for every pound that you had. And a lot of times, if you paid the fine, then you got a better outcome. You got your case reduced from a felony, say, to a misdemeanor, or from a misdemeanor to a violation. But a lot of times, our clients did not have the money to pay the fine, and ended up, unfortunately, having to plead to the higher charge and sometimes even having to do jail time because they could not afford to pay a fine. So you can see how important this law is, in that now these individuals who unfortunately got convictions, and some of them who did time, now get to have this removed from their record. Now, there's also an important distinction in terms of getting expungement. The offense for which you pled had to be a marijuana offense. Sometimes when we would plea bargain, even though you were charged with a marijuana offense, you may plead to something else to avoid the negative consequences of pleading to a drug offense. Then unfortunately, this law does not appear to help you expunge that record. So that's just something important to know. And also, too, at the end there, this law also covers concentrated marijuana, because in recent years we started getting cases of people who were in possession of concentrated marijuana who were being prosecuted. Now they also will have the benefit of expungement. Expungement also applies to 220.03 and 220.06 if it was marijuana that was a controlled substance. Those two charges are criminal possession of a controlled substance, and 220.06 is just a higher level of that based on the amount that you had. Next slide, please. Okay, so for our friends, families, family members, clients who are still currently incarcerated. Now, say you had someone who had been found in possession of 7 pounds of marijuana and ultimately got incarcerated because of that, right? That was a felony. With MRTA, that charge is now reduced to a misdemeanor. So that would be a case where if the Department of Corrections does not catch this case and flag it and automatically release this person and reduce their charge to a misdemeanor, an attorney may have to get involved and file a motion with the court on behalf of that client saying, look, they were initially convicted of a felony. That crime is now a misdemeanor. They probably more than served their time, so they should be released. And that case will be referred back to the sentencing judge. Expungement is automatic if anyone is incarcerated on parole or probation. A hearing is not necessary. The sentence can be lessened. So once again, the law tries to build in that a lot of this stuff should happen automatically. But, if you have loved ones in this position, you should definitely check on their criminal records just to make sure, and check with them to make sure they've been released, obviously. Because you don't always want to rely on Department of Corrections. If you know and you have a loved one who's in this situation, who was convicted of a marijuana charge and have not been released, or their sentence has not been reduced, you should reach out to us at Queens Defenders, and we can follow up on that, check on your loved one, and assist you with filing whatever needs to be filed in order to get their sentence reduced. Next page. Thank you. So one of the big consequences of any controlled substance conviction was the impact it had in immigration court, right? So that's why I mentioned before, there were lots of times where if a client was arrested for anything, even marijuana, even a small amount of marijuana, we would sometimes try to get them to plead to something else, because just the mere fact of having that drug conviction, be it only for marijuana, literally could lead to deportation, and did lead to deportation for many people. So now that these records are being expunged, it's very, very important. And I wish there were a way that it could help the people who already suffered the consequence. But at least for the people who are still here, they need to know the following things. With immigration court, because New York State created this law, and it covers the whole state and it automatically expunges the records, immigration court will not accept that. So if someone has immigration court or is applying for any sort of immigration relief, they should consult an attorney, because that attorney needs to make a motion to expunge their case individually to a judge. And a judge will grant that expungement. Why? Because you need that record to show to immigration so that they will accept that your record was expunged. Immigration court will not accept just, oh, New York State expunged all those cases. That's not good enough for immigration court. Your attorney needs to file a motion and get a decision from the court recognizing the expungement of the record. And that's how you would have to proceed to make sure that immigration court knows that conviction has been removed from your record. Next slide, please. Important information. Misdemeanor convictions can lead to the collection of DNA. So this is, anybody who pled to a misdemeanor, especially for example, criminal sale of marijuana, your DNA was taken because the law allowed that if you were convicted of a Class A misdemeanor, your DNA could be taken. So now, in order to get your DNA out of the DNA database, you need to file a motion to have your DNA removed from the database. So your criminal record is expunged, but your DNA is still in the database. And so that is definitely something that you should pursue. Do not just leave your DNA in the database, because that literally can come back to haunt you in very, very serious ways. And as we reiterated before, we must disclose the arrest to the federal government. That information stays in their database, and all arrests must be disclosed to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Immigration Court. Next slide, please. Employment and probation and parole requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, yes, exactly. So here I included the new policy that was generated by Parole. It is the policy of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision not to impose special conditions prohibiting the use of cannabis. Special conditions can only be considered in cases where it is shown by clear and convincing evidence that the prohibition is reasonably related to the underlying crime. So even after this law was passed, Parole was trying to hold on to, being able to incarcerate people because, they tested positive for marijuana. And so this is very important that they put out this policy statement so that now parole officers are aware that now you cannot just incarcerate people or make it a condition without having some real justification for imposing that condition that a person should not be under the influence of cannabis. So that was very important. The same pretty much now will apply for probation as well, that you cannot just be violated on probation solely because you smoke marijuana. And frankly, they shouldn't even be able to test for it anymore, would be my position. Next slide, please. And you saw at the bottom there, it also said that nothing shall restrict someone who's on parole or probation supervision from accessing medical marijuana. So probation. So the Department of Probation may mandate random drug tests. Positive drug tests for other controlled substances may still result in a violation of probation. So for example, if someone is drug tested and they test positive for marijuana, okay, so they won't punish you for the marijuana, but if you also test positive for cocaine, heroin, or Xanax or something like that, then you can still be punished because those substances are still illegal. So you should not be using cocaine, heroin, barbiturates, Xanax, anything like that. You still should not be using that, and that is usually spelled out when you get probation. Probation cannot punish or penalize anybody for smoking cannabis unless a condition of release specifically prohibits the use of cannabis. Federal jobs may still require a drug test for cannabis. So if you know you're going to be applying to work for example, ICE or any federal agency, just know that the federal law hasn't changed yet. The New York State law has changed. So if you're going to try to work for the federal government, they still have a law prohibiting cannabis. Private companies and organizations may require that employees remain drug-free during their term of employment. So, I mean, obviously, it depends on the company. And if you want to work there, then you would need to comply with their rules and regulations. So, if you are working for a private company and they're saying that, nope, we don't want our employees smoking marijuana, if you want to work there, you would have to abide by their rules. Next slide, please. And that's it. So here's our address, our contact information, my contact information. So should you have any questions or need any assistance, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with someone that can help. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Carolyn, for that amazing and important presentation. Just giving us an overview of folks' rights, responsibilities as it relates to the MRTA. When we passed this legislation, I want to say one of the things that held it up almost held it up at the last minute is the driver responsibility piece. And I'm glad that you went over that piece because we wanted to make sure that folks, who are driving, folks who are driving in this space or in our communities, rather, is the term I was looking for, knows what the rules and regulations are, rights and responsibility, or rules of the road, if you will, as it relates to marijuana and driving while under the influence. So there's clear statutes in the law that outline what you can and can't do. So it's really important that people understand and realize that point as part of the legislation. So I think that that's really important. I think another thing that came up, Carolyn, was one of our viewers asked in regards to the database. The database, the DNA database policy is something that's really important. Folks need to understand, what their rights and responsibilities are in terms of that, as well as probation too. I'm glad you touched on the piece around probation because a lot of folks don't know, again, what their rights, rules, and responsibilities are with probation. And as I mentioned, the Cannabis Control Board is going to be meeting for the first time Tuesday. For the first time since they've been constituted. We went back up at the end of August for an emergency legislative session, not just to extend the eviction moratorium for businesses, for homeowners, as well as for tenants, but we also went up to nominate the members of the leadership of the board, which is so key, critical, and important to make sure that the law actually functions and works as it was intended. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for sharing that expansive summary on what this law means for you and what it means for our community. So I'm gonna, for us and our community, really, I'm gonna bring up Abe back to the stream. Can you see us, Abe?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us back. So Carolyn gave us an overview of the law and gave us such specific details and it gave us a better understanding of what, again, the rules of the road are across all areas of the law. Now, can you share with us some ways that your organization has been working with constituents, working with people in the community to get them into the market of marijuana? What's some of that work that y'all have been laying the groundwork for?
Sure. So, through our events, we try to create opportunities for people to get access to those job postings where that does exist. Like I mentioned, one of our partners, women of color in cannabis, have a lot of job postings and do job trainings, and that's one of the things that they do. With respects to us specifically, all of our conversations, right, we always have social equity in mind. We know that that's part of this bill, and we know that that's an important part of it. So, each conversation that we have addresses different opportunities and ways to get involved in the industry. We have a number of different types of events. We have our Canna Markets. We have our Canna Talks, which I've been kind of talking the most about today. And we have a series called El Hangueo, which is kind of a little bit more relaxed, right? So at our Canna Markets, one of the things that we do is, as I mentioned with our other expungement event, we try to target people from the community, people who are trying to get involved in the industry. So our Canna Markets are oriented around entrepreneurs who already are involved in the cannabis industry in some way. So Prior to that, because of the MRTA and the regulations have not come out with respect to THC. For those who don't know in the room, right, THC is the part of the plant that has kind of psychoactive effects, but there is something called CBD, which is a different part of the cannabis plant that has a lot of therapeutic effects. It's been purported to have medical effects. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs that do products around CBD. There are also ancillary products, which are products in the market that are not plant touching, that do not involve manipulating the plant, which is where a lot of these regulations and licensure is going to have to be followed. So in our events, we discussed these different avenues to get into the industry. I know at one point I had some technical difficulties, so I was in and out, but I think at one point Ms. Joseph described the different licenses that are going to be that are part of the MRTA. So there are 11 different licenses. A lot of our work right now is trying to get people educated about what those licenses are, right? Because each of those licenses is a different pathway into the industry.
Actually, Abe, let me jump in since you're talking about licenses. It looks like Annette Long Manigault, which is who one of our viewers tonight asked, or this afternoon asked, what are the state laws if you want to get a license? So you touched on it, and I'll ask Carolyn the same question. What I guess what's the law in regards to getting a license? And I know the answer because the board is not set, but you'll share. If that's you, that's not you, right?
Do you want me to share or Carolyn to share?
No, I'm saying Carolyn and then you, but I'm saying I'm saying I know the answer, but I want for our viewers.
And I want you to tell the answer, because the thing is, I think my understanding is until the board meets and begins to make the decisions about what the requirements are, what information is needed, I can't really answer that question yet. So I think a lot of it depends on the board promulgating all the regulations that will guide everything, that will guide the license, will guide the sale, the use. So we need the board to actually generate the regulations.
Yeah, and that's exactly the right answer. I want you to make sure you heard that, Annette, from our experts and from me on the call, on the live stream today. It's important that the Cannabis Control Board meets, because the Cannabis Control Board is the policy setting body, regulation setting body for the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. They're only having their first meeting this Tuesday. So they're getting themselves organized. The board was fully appointed, and the Senate went back into session, as I said earlier, late last month. Well, now we're in October, end of August, and made sure that the leadership was appointed to the board so then they can fill out the rest of the vacancies on the board. So those are forthcoming and soon coming. I encourage you to pay attention through our office. Stay engaged on our email blast. As we get updates, we're definitely going to be sharing them with the community. Stay in touch with Queens Offenders. Stay in touch with our partners at Canaware, because they're going, as the information comes out, they will be making folk made aware and available to answer these questions. But I wanted you all to touch on it because I want folks to understand that it's a process. We passed a law a couple months back, and now we're in the process of implementing the law and creating the functions of the law as we go. So that's really key, critical, and important. I also want to plug that my colleague, State Senator Jay Sanders Jr., is doing a cannabis education course where you can go through, I believe it's an 8-week course online to learn about the industry, to learn about how to get into the industry. I know that this cycle is closed, but when the next cycle opens up, make sure you all sign up. We've included the flyers on our social media. We'll continue. I know my staff hear me now on the call. We'll continue to share it in our email blast and with you all, our partners, so that people know how to get into the market and how to become effective business owners. In this community, we want to make sure that we are also creating jobs. Abe touched on this as well. We want to create the jobs in this industry. We don't want to just be the folks who are employed and are working for somebody, especially because this industry has hurt our community so much. This is how we work to rehabilitate. This is how we work to reduce harm, by making sure folks have access to the market and the resources that are available in the market. So I thank you so much, Carolyn and Abe, for just providing today's informational and platform. Let's see if we have any other questions on our other platforms. So right now I'm just looking at Facebook Live and trying to pull in questions while I'm waiting for folks to drop their questions in the question box. Let's go back to the discussion that I wanted to inject us into with today's discussion around the MRTA law. Can you differentiate again? And I know you went over it in the presentation, Carolyn, the difference between a seal and an expungement.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So in New York State, most cases are sealed. So you'll hear, like if you plead guilty to disorderly conduct, that's a violation, it's not a crime, and the record is sealed. Or, you know, if you actually go to trial and you're acquitted, the record is dismissed and sealed. And you think everything's great and it's off your record, but not so much, because a lot of private companies can somehow still access the fact that you had that case. And then sometimes that actually hurts people in terms of their employment opportunities or even housing opportunities. So when a case is sealed, that is a good outcome, right? That means that most people can't access it, but law enforcement can access it. Law enforcement will keep your pictures, your fingerprints, everything, unless you ask for them back. And so also too, like when you go to immigration court with a case is sealed, like I said, motions can be made by a prosecutor or by another party to unseal a case, which means open it, meaning that then everyone can see what you were charged with, what the allegations were. Even if they were proven to be false, sometimes the allegations are heinous, they're horrible, and can hurt you, even though the case was dismissed. So you really would want that to stay closed. But sealing has loopholes where law enforcement or other agencies can access those records even though they're sealed. With expungement, it's gone. No one else other than the person whose case it is or their agent can access a case that has been expunged. So that is a very, very, very important piece of MRTA, and hopefully with the Assembly members' new law, expanding expungement and creating the opportunity for expungement automatically, it's important because people want to move forward. You know, sometimes you make a mistake when you're young, and now, you know, you're 10 years later, 20 years later, you know, you've gotten your life together. This mistake still haunts you. So that's why expungement is so important, especially because our communities are the ones that are over policed, right? And over, you know, populating the court systems. So yeah, we should have the ability for someone who's earned it to have the record be wiped clean.
Without a doubt, and I thank you so much for just talking about that difference between sealing and expungement and what it means, right, for our community. Why is one better than the other in that respect? So I thank you for sharing that. And I want to remind our viewers that this is session one of a two-session workshop experience. We will be back here at 6 p.m., both on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, as well as Twitter. And I'm hoping to get Instagram too, because on Fridays I do my Critically Important with Khalil, where I just have unofficial discussions about issues of the day. But I really want to use that time. We're really going to use that time tonight in terms of Critically Important and switch out and really focus on hearing more about the National Expungement Week, what I'm doing as your state legislator to address the issues of expungement, and really just expose folks to the MRTA and what is expected, or what the rules of the road are with this new law. So I want to, if you guys don't have any other comments or things that you want to add to our viewers today, Abe or Carolyn, you want to jump in and just add a closing statement, or just anything that you want to share with our viewers, leave with our viewers, and then we will sign off and get prepared for our 6 o'clock, which I'm really excited for.
Okay, so I have one thing I would add. There was a question I saw in the chat. What is the best way to check someone's criminal record? They would apply to the Division of Criminal Justice Services. I would suggest that they contact Queens Defenders Rockaway Community Justice Center, because the staff there can easily help someone contact that agency to get their criminal record, and we can assist them in doing it in a manner that's much cheaper, because there is a fee that is charged if someone just does it on their own. So I would definitely suggest that you go to our Rockaway Community Justice Center, which is on Mott Avenue, and our staff there can help you get your criminal record.
Absolutely, and I don't say this about all my neighbors, but Queens offenders are a good neighbor. I'm kidding. I love all my neighbors, but no, Queens offenders is a good neighbor. Their office is right downstairs from my office here on Mott Avenue. So again, if you need that resource in regards to your obtaining your criminal record and working to get that information, their office is here, ready, willing, and able to help any and everyone, and we can get you connected. Carolyn left her contact information on the Zoom, so I want to thank you so much for that, Carolyn. Any closing statements, Abe?
Yeah, sure. I just again want to thank both of you for your partnership on this issue and for the great work you're doing in the community. And just encourage everybody to tap in, follow us on Instagram, Cannabis Society, or we have a Facebook page as well. And just stay tuned, because there's a lot of education that needs to happen, and that's a core part of what we do. And we're going to be continuing to have these conversations as the situation evolves in New York State.
All right, thank you guys so very much for today. I'll see folks from your organizations, if not you, back at 6 p.m. for our viewers to do our part 2, session 2 of today's workshop around expungement. Again, it's National Expungement Week here, and we want to celebrate by making sure that we give folks the information that's key, critical, and important to them. As you're a member of the Assembly and as the author of the Office of Expungement Bill, Assembly Bill number 7440, I think it's so important that as we're moving into the market of marijuana, as we're moving from a society that is working to decriminalize and decarcerate, we have to make sure that those resources and information is available to our community. We addressed issues of safety, we addressed issues of driving, we addressed the root and the core of the law. We also addressed how to get into the market. And I want to make sure that you guys, if you have any questions or concerns, that you reach out to my office, 718-327-1845, 718-322-4958. The numbers are across the screen. We're open Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Fridays, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We want to make sure that the community has the resources and information to be a part of this market and to also be a part of getting their lives back together as we're working to move away from over-incarceration in our communities. Thank you so much, Carolyn Joseph, Esquire from Queens Offenders. Thank you so much, Abe Tejada from Cannabis Society. Looking forward to seeing you guys again tonight.